culture, and community are the two foundational elements of this brand and business.
People want a more elevated experience. People feel proud about paying for that.
Hey everyone, Susan Choi here from the Food Institute. This is 𝗂𝗏𝗁 Spotlight, and we are talking Latin food today. Not just Latin food, but Latin seasonings. When you think of Latin cuisine, you probably think of one type of food first, maybe tacos, salsa, stuff like that. But what about all the other wonderfully diverse cuisines that make up Hispanic food in the US? I'm really excited to welcome Scott Hattis and Kenneth Luna to the show. They are the founders of Loisa, a line of organic Latin seasonings and condiments that go way beyond guacamole and chips. Scott, Kenneth, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Hey.
Thanks for having us.
First off, please tell us, what is Loisa and what is its mission?
Loisa is a Latin flavor company at its core. It started from a need Kenny and I both felt in our own homes. We're both part of multicultural families. My wife's Dominican, Kenny's Dominican and Peruvian. And as we started families, we wanted to keep the cultural traditions we had in our homes alive, but in a way that felt relevant to us and right for our generation and generations to come. So from that very small thought and that very small realization has been born this company. Currently, we have a line of organic seasonings, Sazon and Adobo being the lead SKUs, as we mentioned, and then a line of sofrito sauces as well, which is a really versatile cooking sauce that is a base of so many dishes in Latin cooking. They're all natural, only real ingredients. We say we do right by the culture and do right by the community always, and that comes from our products on upwards to the brand and how we communicate.
Who is your target demographic? Is it Latin immigrants in America? Is it Latin Americans? You know, the children of those immigrants? Is it the average American consumer? Who are you guys focusing on when it comes to sales?
So as of today, I would say our target demographic is anyone who likes to cook. But I like to go back to our early days. When we were starting the business, you know, the target demographic that we had in mind was second generation Latinos born in the US who grew up eating these foods, but have now kind of grown up and lost a little bit of touch with those foods and those flavors. Why does that happen? Obviously, you know, you assimilate, you go to college, you have a job, you start traveling more, you get exposed to other cuisines. But like all millennials at this point now, we're all starting to enter that kind of age where we're having our own families, right? And I think nostalgia really starts tapping into a lot of these consumers. And that was the target demographic we started with. But as we think about the business today, who is our target demographic? We like to say the term Latin adjacent, or, you know, if you're friends with someone who comes from the Caribbean, whether you're from Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, or Cuba, and you've been around these foods are for you as well. Right. And they're becoming more popular with time. So now as we think about the demographic, it's really about making these foods accessible to even non-Latinos, especially as we grow into retail.
In retail, the posture of the brand and how we talk about our products is changing. It's more open, it's more educational, but at the same time, we are still a brand about celebration and pride in Latin culture and cooking. So that's the balance that we are constantly talking about and aiming to land when it comes to how we put the products out in front of potential customers.
It seems too that there is somewhat of a learning gap between, you know, awareness of these products and what the actual, you know, the average American consumer knows. You know, like I mentioned in my intro, when people think of Hispanic food, they might think of like a taco or burrito or something like that, right? As opposed to, you know, the rich diversity of products that you guys have, the adobo, the sofrito, you know. How do you guys simultaneously educate consumers about your product and promote your product as well? And how does that translate, you know, in a boardroom, you know, in the business development side when you guys are, you know, having those meetings with investors? What's that like?
I think foundationally, the realization we had is that this side of Latin cooking cuisine in some ways was held hostage a bit by big food. Like big brands, you know, with artificial ingredients that aren't bringing new customers in, owned this space. And, you know, that presents an inherent opportunity, but also a challenge, like you say, in terms of education around these foods and these specific cuisines that are less mature than maybe Mexican cuisine in the US. What I think we know to be true is that there's enough people and the Latin culture on this side of things is big and broad enough in the US to warrant more knowledge and appreciation of these foods. Before we launched in Whole Foods nationwide, you'd go to that store and you wouldn't be able to find the products you need to cook like anything but Mexican style cuisine. And that's something that has to change. And we're just excited to be a part of the story that it is changing that.
Some things that I've noticed that are really interesting is just the several market opportunities that seem to be so ripe for Louisa. First off, you have the continual rise of the Hispanic American population in the US. Circana research shows that Hispanic shoppers make up for 16% of CPG growth in America. That's a huge number. You also have the continual rising trend of people wanting global flavors, authentic food experiences, and they want to cook at home more. And finally, just the need for diversity of these kinds of products. As you guys have mentioned earlier, it was the only types of products available of this nature was, through big name brands. They had, quite a monopoly, in this area, but you guys are really coming through as, a really unique, diverse offering when it comes to this line of ingredients, and I'd love to hear, what are your guys' thoughts on these trends, and from where you stand, as entrepreneurs, as CPG manufacturers, what kind of impact and response you've been seeing with that?
I think on the the Latino community driving a lot of the growth in CPG, I think in building the brand when we were those early days, we talked to a lot of customers, and a lot of these individuals, families, they have more disposable income now, and they want a more elevated experience of the foods that they grew up eating. There is such a thing as financial gravity when it comes to the inputs to make a product. Realistically, if you're buying something for $1, $1.25, $1.50, it's practically impossible for that to be a high quality item, a healthy item without preservatives and artificial colors. It's just not possible anymore, especially with inflation. People want a more elevated experience. People feel proud about paying for that. And that was really core in building out the product and the rest and the ingredients that we have, which are everything you read in the ingredients, you understand. It's very simple. And people wanted to spend for that. That's one. Two, Scott and I, as we got older, we're shopping through the natural food channels, to the point that you brought up earlier, people want more kind of ethnic experiences in their kitchen. Unfortunately, the existing incumbents out there aren't allowed on shelf in a lot of these channels. So there's just a big gap there. There was just no one occupying that real estate, and what they ended up doing, these retailers, is just putting in more Mexican brands. Like, I don't need another Mexican salsa. I love the brands out there, but I've had every variety that's out there at this point. And for us, that was both an opportunity, but also part of the problem, right? Where one, if you don't know what exists out there, customers aren't going to ask for it. But two, to overcome that challenge of going into natural with a new product line, that's not easy. And we've been working at this now for 6+ years. Without more brands coming on shelf in the natural channel where a lot of food innovation happens, these cuisines are kind of stuck in the past and they're not really evolving. And, we are one of the upstart brands kind of growing in the space, but, I think that's been a big part of the problem as well.
Yeah. And finally, I want to talk about the great name of your product, Loisa, a play off of the phrase 𝗂𝗂𝘁'𝗂𝗃, what Puerto Rican immigrants in New York City would lovingly term the Lower East Side, a neighborhood in Manhattan, long known to be, a landmark, home for Puerto Rican immigrants in New York City for decades, right? Nuyorican, the Nuyorican community. And that's what I personally am so intrigued by when I see the name Loisa, when I think of the products, and the, as you guys were mentioning, culture, community, that's what's really important to you all. How do you promote, these ideas of culture and community through your CPG product, and why do you think it's so important to do so?
From day one, culture and community are the two foundational elements of this brand and business. It drives everything we do, from content and storytelling to product development. Now with the 𝗂𝗂𝘁'𝗂𝗃 and Loisa, that's where I live with my family when we started the business. And its roots in New York are super important. I think for us, we talked about forever and still do the diversity of the Latin community here in New York, the energy of the community here in New York, the stories of, you know, immigrant stories that come to New York, including my wife's family from the Dominican Republic, and just being a brand rooted in that. It's about everything we do. It really is a through line across the business, and I'm glad you asked that, because it is just so important to what we do.
Absolutely. All right, Kenneth Luna and Scott Hattis, founders of Loisa. Guys, thank you again for joining me. It's been great.
Thank you.
And for more of our great content, you can always check out this playlist. Till next time, I'm Susan Choi for the Food Institute. Take care.